welcome to Emerging Technology Horizons. I'm Dr. Mark Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of NDIA's Emerging Technologies Institute. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about an absolutely critical issue for scientists and engineers, especially those of us who work on the intersection of science and policy, and that is science communication. And our guest today is Dr. Laura Lindenfeld, who's the Dean of the School of Communication and Journalism at Stony Brook University. A little bit of background on Dean Lindenfeld. She was named Dean of the School of Communication Journalism in March of 2020 after serving previously as the interim dean. But Dean Lindenfeld actually joined Stony Brook as the executive director of the infamous Alda Center. Can I say infamous? The famous Alda Center for Communicating Science and professor in the School of Journalism in 2016. Previously, she served as a professor of communication and director of the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center, which is a nonpartisan independent research center at the University of Maine. In 2015, Dr. Lindenfeld received the University of Maine Presidential Public Service Award, and as a scholar and a leader, she has dedicated her work to supporting growth and innovation across the board in higher education. Commitment that's clearly reflected in her work at Stony Brook's Alda Center. I'll just mention a few numbers. So the Alda Center is an amazing organization. They've trained over 14,000 scientists worldwide. Oh, or even larger.
20,000 now.
20,000. Okay. Wow. We need to update our 20,000. And you've introduced many times that to a number of people to what you call the Alda Method. You provide international leadership in conducting and connecting research and practice to advance clear science and medical communication. Let me also point out, Dr. Lindenfeld holds a PhD in cultural studies from the University of California, Davis. She has published extensively, worked with a number of agencies, and is especially known for her work in food culture. Over 50 peer-reviewed articles, chapters, and reviews, large range of journals, including Science Communication, Ecology and Society, Environmental Communication, and has a 2016 book co-authored with Fabio Parasacoli entitled Feasting Our Eyes, Food, Films, and Cultural Identity in the United States, which was published by the Columbia University Press. So, Laura, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time.
Well, so have I. Great to be here with you.
Let me start out could you tell me a little bit about the Alda Center, what your mission is, and then maybe tell us a little bit about the Alda Method?
Yeah, well, if you ask Alan Alda, he'll say the mission of the Alda Center is world domination, helping scientists become clear, vivid communicators who operate with empathy to understand their audiences and really convey information in ways that land with people rather than in the way you want to say it.
Very good. So let me start. Is it correct to assume that most scientists are not great communicators, or is that a stereotype?
I won't quote you on that.
Okay. You can quote me on that.
I think, what does it mean to be a great communicator? A great communicator is when your work lands with the other person. So you may be a really great communicator in the context of teaching a class or publishing an article, but that may not land with a policymaker. So, you know what I think happens when we train people in science? We train you in really specific language and culture, and then we forget. Alan Alda has this term that he loves to use, the curse of knowledge. It's when you forget what it feels like not to know something you know so well. And when you have that curse, I love knowledge. Look, universities, knowledge production factories, I'm all in. But when you forget that, when you lose distance of what someone else doesn't know, you only communicate about it in the way you currently know how. So I think we get some of the communication trained out of us in the scientific enterprise. Our job at the Alda Center is to help you reclaim that sense of connectedness with audiences and what they need.
So it's interesting you say, as a faculty member, my favorite classes to teach were the introductory level undergraduate classes, because those were the students who didn't have the preconceived knowledge, and they'd ask some of the profound fundamental questions that would make you step back and question what you knew. So that's very definitely resonating with me. Is it safe to say also that in academia we don't always reward good communication? We reward faculty members for publications and written contributions and not necessarily for their communication skills?
Yeah, what I'll say is I think, I'm like hope springs eternal optimist. What I'm seeing is some nice changes in academia where more and more we're seeing engagement and communication with different public audiences valued. And I'm just so heartened looking at younger scientists who understand this should be part and parcel of what they do and what it means to be a scientist. Um, yeah, I think we get trained in a way that teaches us to speak in the jargon of our clan. I mean,
Yeah,
you went through this
yeah,
yourself,
yeah,
Mark. You do
yeah,
your
yeah.
comprehensive exams or your defense, and you got to speak that language, and you get judged on that. And you really want to be a member of that crew and row with that crew. So it almost feels like I like to think of it as a kind of bilingualism or
Yeah.
multilinguistic approach. Polyglots. We should be polyglots,
Yeah.
speaking science and speaking to different communities that might care more about what we do and use the products that result from our science, or just experience Alan likes to call the wonder and joy of science, the
Yeah.
beauty of science.
That's that also. I think about some of my career missteps. One of my the silliest things I did. So I had was on loan from the university in the Pentagon working for the Air Force. I first week in the Pentagon, I'm supposed to give a presentation to the chief of staff of the Air Force, and I go to the whiteboard and I start deriving equations. I swear. And somewhere after the second line, he just stops me and he says, "Okay, we know you're smart. Just tell us the answer."
You were doing exactly what you were trained to do.
I was. I got
love
better.
that. I'm going to tell Alan Alda that story. Okay, I
Yeah.
think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I did get better at it. I'm going to ask a somewhat rhetorical question, but why is this so important? Why is it so important that scientists are better communicators?
All right, let's step back and think about science in the broader sense: science, technology, engineering, math. There's not a moment in our lives that we are experiencing on this planet that doesn't depend to some degree on science in that broadest sense. I mean, the fact that I'm talking to you right now over the internet on a computer with a headset, that technology came from somewhere. If we don't value the scientific process as a society, first of all, I think we lose out on one of the greatest human inventions. I mean, this is beautiful art, music, science, elegant. I like when we call theory elegant. It sounds like an orchestra. And it matters to us. It matters to our ability to remain on this planet as healthy people. There is just not one area of our lives that is not touched by science and technology. And you know what? You can't make change if you don't communicate well. So if we're gonna help, I've long felt that I think my goal in life, aside from being a great mother and wife and all those other things, is to help make science matter more and to help people understand that it's beautiful, it's important, it affects us, and we need to support it. And I love the idea of thinking about science and society as being more fused with each other. Scientists are people too. We
Most of them.
we benefit. Well, we try.
Yeah, that's
You are. I'll call you
We've known a
human.
few. I absolutely take your point. Do we need to have more scientists who are engaged with policy decisions and policymakers? Is that a primary focus? Is it more engagement with the public at large? Is it all of the above?
Oh heck yeah! I mean, I think we need science communication as an activity and a practice and something that's valued by people who produce the science, technology, engineering, and math, and by specialists who know how to do communication and appreciate and value and understand the science. Really, that's what the Alda Center is after, is helping to grow that capacity and professionalize science communication. Policy, I mean, look, what's policy there to do? It's there to help us figure out how to live our best lives as communities, as governments, as organizations. So if we don't have science effectively entering into the policy process, and effectively, I think is an important word, we're going to miss out on some important decisions we need to make as a society.
Well, we're one of my former hats. So the Department of Defense is without a doubt the largest single government sponsor of research in the United States. The DoD science technology budget is close to $120 billion a year. The next closest agency is NIH, National Institute of Health, which is in the mid 30s. National Science Foundation hovers, about 8 billion. NASA's at 24. So DoD is the big dog on the block for S&T, and yet the public doesn't actually know a lot about that. And they might know about DARPA. They might know a little bit about some of the government labs, although in most cases they don't. So what is the DoD doing wrong? Why? Do you have a sense of why that story isn't out there and what the DoD could do better to communicate its contributions?
I'm not sure it's so much about doing wrong as about unopened doors.
Okay.
One thing I'll say, when we train scientists to communicate, we're always asking them to think about who's your audience, what's your goal. Like, let's boil it down. Who is it you're trying to reach? And a goal is something that changes in that other person. Not that you don't change too, because hopefully you do as a part of the interaction. Communication is not a one-way street. It's not about a perfect message. It's about relationships and connections and all that good stuff. And that's how we run our trainings. But what is it you want to accomplish? Is it a policymaker who you want to have understand a certain technology that they're going to support, or by helping get funding for it or introduce it? Is it communities who may have certain perspectives on things that you want to change? I think the more that we can start to work strategically at that level to understand what it is we want to accomplish, and then break it down. I don't know. Have you ever run a marathon?
I will confess that I have not.
I did. I don't know why.
But I marvel at people who do.
I did in grad school. I am not a natural born runner, but I did this crazy thing while writing a dissertation. Go figure. But I think, when we talk about setting goals, for me, it was like, oh my God, get me through the first mile. If I'm going to run 26.2 miles, I got to be able to figure out how to run 3 and then 5 and then 10. And setting goals is like that. And oftentimes, I think the first goal we really need to set is to build trust. It's so critical. It's actually validated in the social science literature around communication that if you build trust with people, their ability to hear you and take what you say and build on it and connect around it and then go to the next level, maybe doing things together, is absolutely essential. If you distrust someone, you're not going to believe what they have to say. So, take that marathon, break it down to who are the communities with whom you need to build trust. Why might they not trust you? Why might they not know about you? So to me, it's a combination of helping people at DOD or funded by DOD to understand who do they want to reach and why. What change is it that you want to see in the world? That's exactly the kind of thing we work on at the Alda Center.
So I love that idea of building trust. So I'm wondering if perhaps some of the language or methodology that we use within the scientific community can make that difficult. For example, what we call a theory is different than what the public at large might think of in the word theory. The fact that in science we will change our conclusions based on new data. Sometimes that's seen as being, as flip-flopping, as being inconsistent, when it's a principle we prize, but yet it may not be perceived that way. Is that one of the issues that we're faced with?
And I think so. You've asked a question about fundamental barriers to understanding science, and I think those apply to the context you're working in at DOD. Look, there's jargon, specific language. There's times when that makes total sense. Like if I wind up, God forbid, in the ER and I need surgery, I want them to use jargon. Don't take the long road and explain everything. Open me up, fix me, sew me up. Thank you very much. That's what jargon's there for. But it can be alienating if you're not part of that clan and you don't understand it. So jargon is a huge barrier. And then so much of our work is done in statistics. And most people are not trained to that degree in statistics, and it becomes a tremendous barrier. And then we throw up some graphs and charts that are like so tiny you can't read them, and we use a laser pointer and we look at the screen instead of making eye contact. So we're communicating about things in the way that we like to, rather than in the ways people can receive information. Like, look at the policy world. In your experience, you've had a lot of interaction in the policy world. What do policymakers want to know? I mean, do they want to know all of the background details?
No, you're exactly right. They basically, previous story relevant. They want to know the answer. They'll want to know some relevant background, relevant history. How did we get here? But by and large, it's like, okay, what's the right? Get me to the right answer.
Yeah, it's it's like the inverted pyramid that journalists use. Yeah. But scientists, we do the opposite. Like, if you imagine, I'm holding my hands like an upside down pyramid, like a funnel. Yeah. We want to do all the background and the theory. You're absolutely right. By the way, what's super fun, I've done a lot of work studying interdisciplinary collaboration. Yeah, say theory to one scientist, it means totally something different than to another scientist. So we could talk about that if you want, but boy, for the public, that's just like, ooh, sounds hypothetical and not real. But we start with the background, we get in the weeds, we justify it. It's very defensive. Here's what so-and-so said, and here's what so-and-so said. We're going to test this tiny thing. And then at the very end, we say, and here's what we think we learned and what you might do with it. Flip it. So you got a standing up pyramid with the tip on top. That's how journalists, we say, don't bury the lead. Policymakers need to know why this matters to them and the constituents they serve. So it's another huge barrier, the way we build arguments, very defensive. It's not the way most public audiences, and by the way, there's not one public, there are multiple different publics, and it shifts from issue to issue. So the other piece is, you have to understand that audiences are not like you, that they configure themselves around different ideas and belief systems and values, and that if they don't trust you and they trust someone who distrusts you, the level of ability to move forward is going to be even more difficult. So there's all these different kinds of barriers around science and society that I think it's incumbent upon us in the scientific community to help pave the way. Not that it's solely our responsibility, but I think, I'm here directing the Alda Center and running this marvelous school because I believe we can make a difference through communication.
That all rings so true from my own experience. I will tell you, some of the most fun roles that I've had have been jobs where basically my job was to be the skeptic. And you can imagine in defense circles, you're in the Pentagon, you're on the E-ring, and you got lots of people marching through your office or the, top offices in the building with their decks of PowerPoint slides, and everything looks good in PowerPoint. And all the physics lines up and then, being the person in the room who, when they walk out, gets to turn to the senior and say, okay, here's why what they just told you won't work. Here's where they're violating the laws of physics. Here's where, even if it does work, you wouldn't want it. And that depends on trust. They've got to trust. You've got to build. So that all makes so much sense from my own experience. I appreciate. So if I can, are there different strategies in addressing a large audience versus a small audience?
Yeah, the strategy may be different, especially if the audience is a really mixed audience. We get this question all the time when we train scientists. The principle is the same. Do as much homework as you can, whether it's oral communication, like you're standing in front of a group presenting, or you're writing something, the premise is the same. Do your level best to understand who you're going to be connecting with, what they care about. It's not as much, we have this idea like, let's screw up the top of their heads and fill them with knowledge, and they're going to be just fine. And we like to equate that. It's called the knowledge deficit model, by the way, and it's been proven not to work, and yet we continue to do it. It's where I have challenges with the term science literacy, because I really feel like it's more about connecting. When we train, we have this picture of a bucket with holes in it and water leaking out. That's the knowledge deficit model. You pour it in, it leaks out. It's got to have somewhere to stick, because people show up as whole human beings. And if you're talking to people about something they care about, and you can make a connection around that, the information is much more likely to land. So whether it's a large audience or a small audience, figure out who they are. What's at stake for them? What do they care about? I mean, actually, Mark, I was thinking a lot in advance of this conversation with you about how perceptions may have shifted around defense with Ukraine.
Right. Right.
And that's it's a different set of feelings that come up in people who may not right out of the gate say, oh yeah, I want to support the Department of Defense and learn more about it. I think people, their hearts are really different because they're seeing what's happening there.
I also, I also sometimes get frustrated because I don't think the department does a particularly good job of explaining how department funded science impacts daily life. GPS, yeah, every time you use your cell phone to figure out where you are, those are satellites operated by the Department of Defense. The COVID vaccines. I mean, if you trace back the history of the mRNA work, it was actually work that DARPA funded when other agencies wouldn't. And DARPA, given their mission, they said, let's take a chance on this. So, and again, yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. So it's frustrating sometimes, and I will also tell you, by the way, sometimes, in my opinion, the Department of Defense is its own worst enemy, in that they'll have really good stories, and they won't want to get the stories out there. That it's not necessarily part of the culture of getting those stories out there.
I mean, to me, there's got to be, for any organization. Look, you're the insider on DOD. I'm not. There's got to be an organizational commitment to wanting to make sure you've got those connections. And then you build a strategy around how to do that. You get people trained who need to be trained. You figure out, where do we want to start telling this story in a different way? And how are we then going to measure the impact of those changes to determine if what we're doing is working? Bring the tools of science that we have to conduct science to understanding if the communication we're sending out in the world is making the difference we want. And if not, change it, try something else, or refine it.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you give us a science communication success story?
Oh, a science communication success story. Yeah. Gosh, there's so many. I'm going to think about one when I was at University of Maine. We were doing a lot of work around sustainability, and there have been and still are notorious challenges around managing fisheries. You've got the people who are commercial fishermen, fisherwomen, who need to live off this resource, and then you've got the people who want to make sure that we're not overfishing and depleting the stocks. And one of the interventions we saw is that you often get really entrenched, angry positioning around resources like this. Being able to intervene through communication and understand that everybody likes to spend their time fishing in their free time in these bays and areas could build a sense of common culture that could get you a step further. That sounds like a little thing. It can make a huge difference to have built some trust around something that you care about that may be related to what the conflict is, or maybe completely separate, that can help a group move forward.
Interesting.
That's a really compelling one for me. And it's hard to do. Actually, a lot of the training we do, we use improv to train scientists.
Okay.
We can talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is, and this comes back to your question about large audience, small audience. Mm-hmm. What do you know going in? And then what do you experience when you walk in the door? And how are you going to deal with that? Because reality is never what you planned it. I don't know how your life has been, but it just never works out exactly the way I imagined it. And then you have to be on your toes and be responsive and responsible.
Yeah, no, that's very true. As we were saying before the recording started, my career path was not at all what I would have expected. It's in the category. I'm sure you feel the same way. If I could go back and tell my younger self all the things to look out for, I wish I could. Yeah. It's funny. I was a couple of years ago. I was back speaking in the department where I got most of my degrees, in the MIT Aero department, and I made the mistake of talking to an audience with my wife there as well. She's also a graduate from the same department, and the reason it was a mistake was so one of the students asked me, well, how did you get to where you are, and how did you follow your career path? And I said, well, basically, I think I was really lucky. I won some lottery tickets, some opportunities materialized, right place, right time. And when I'm all done, my wife says, no, that's all wrong. And she says, first of all, you followed some strategies, which was you always said yes when an opportunity materialized. I was like, huh, yeah, actually, you're kind of right. And I started, and I kind of rolled back and thought, yeah, that was one of the pieces of advice I would give to my own students. Like when opportunities materialize, seize on them. Take advantage of them, and you never know where they're going to lead. So, so, so if I could, our time is winding down, but for scientists, engineers who are interested in learning more about the center, maybe getting involved in some of the center activities, where do they go? Where do they start?
You want to find out more about what we do, you can visit aldacenter.org.
Okay.
Go to the website. You can connect around our professional development programs. We do trainings in person and online. Of course, everybody moved things online, and it turns out
Right.
using improv, theater-based approaches to train scientists to communicate works online as well. So we do that. We also do coaching. We do a lot of work with people around media. We have some specialized segments we could do around climate change. We have a program for women in STEM. So have a look on the website. You'll learn more. We also have, and I think this is really neat, we've launched a new master's program in science communication, and it's specifically focused on helping people who are trained scientists become professional communicators.
Is it online or is it?
It's online. You can do it hybrid, online or in person. We just launched this last year. We also have a certificate program for people pursuing their degrees to learn how to communicate better about their work while becoming a scientist. This has long been a dream of Alan's. He thinks communication shouldn't just be that last step that you do at the end. It infuses, when you ask about the impact of communication, when you do communication well, you get great science done, and that science has an impact. So let's infuse that across people's learning experience. And I think we need to move more scientists into communication jobs, because they're going to understand the specificity and get that. It's important to have it be compelling. It also needs to be accurate.
So within the department, I would try to encourage as many scientists as possible to do those sorts of jobs. Embed themselves in other parts of the organization, communicate to other parts of the department, what science can do, what it can contribute, sometimes what it can't contribute. So again, that all sounds good. Our time is about up. Laura, I can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been a wonderful conversation. Maybe we can invite you back at some point. All right. Yeah. No, my pleasure as well. Laura Lindenfeld, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to be looking forward to the great work that continues to come out of the Alda Center. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.